One of the other big positions at the top of the draft every single year is offensive tackle. For whatever reason, whether it's NFL teams believe that's the most important position, whether it's simply the default when there isn't a superstar quarterback or whatever it is, everybody always targets tackles at the top of the draft. And according to Trev, this is a rich class for offensive tackle talent.
It is. The premium positions, I think, are very exciting in this upcoming draft. We talked about quarterbacks, I think top-end wide receiver talent as well, edge rushers, offensive tackles, and even some lockdown corners, man. All of the positions that you look for as exciting positions, these premium positions that teams covet and trade up for and build their whole draft classes around. It's pretty rich in that category, especially offensive tackles. So I sent you a list of a handful of offensive tackles to watch for this show, and I'm very curious where you want to start, because there's a couple of guys that are the notable names I think everybody knows right now, but then there's a handful that have really risen up the boards, have a high ceiling with what they do athletically, and then there's one player in particular who I'm very curious where you have him watching all of these guys for the first time around, not having any preconceived thoughts on them.
Let's start with the two studs, because you sent me an extensive list, and I'm not going to lie, I kind of forgot how long it took to watch offensive tackles, because you can't just watch, there's no short list.
The good plays.
Yeah, there's no short way of doing it. You have to actually watch quite a lot of plays back to back, and it took some time. So, I scanned through the top guys in your list, and then you had a group that were lower down, that were your sort of next tier down, and I didn't even get to some of those guys. So let's start with the two studs. Joe Alt from Notre Dame and Olu Fashanu from Penn State. My initial reaction is either one of these guys would have been offensive tackle 1 in last year's draft. They are both really good. And Fashanu in particular, I think, is the best athlete and mover I can remember coming into the NFL when he gets there. At offensive tackle, I don't remember the last guy that was better than that.
It's actually a really great question. I'm trying to pull this up really quick. Okay, let's see. Offensive tackle. Is there anybody that I would have said would have been a better athlete? Penei Sewell. Sewell is a fantastic athlete, but I even think that Olu moves better in pass protection than Penei did. I'd say the same thing about Darisaw, who I also thought was a really great athlete. Wirfs is obviously a crazy good athlete. We're talking about some of those best athletes that we have seen at the tackle position over the last couple of years. And the thing was, Sam, is I don't know if you knew this, Olu could have declared last year. He was just a redshirt sophomore, but he was still draft eligible. He could have declared, and he got a first-round grade. And he still opted to go back to Penn State. He's very young. Last year was 2022 was his first time as a full-time starter. So maybe he just loves college. Maybe he wants to get his degree. I don't know what it was. Maybe he just wants another year of playing college football, because you only get to do this once in a lifetime. But he ended up going back to school. But I agree with you. He would have been offensive tackle 1 last year. The way that this guy moves at 6'6", 320 pounds in pass protection is about as good as I've ever seen since I really started to scout guys seriously. The foot speed, the balance, the hand speed, the counters, the way that he takes contact, the way that he can dictate contact. I mean, you get some of these rushers that are 6'3", 240 pounds, who are very clearly more nimble than he is, have less weight on their body, and they are trying to attack him on the outside shoulder and get him to full vertical drop, and he beats him to the spot every time. Now, I'll tell you this. It probably helps that Olu Fashanu in practice goes up against Chop Robinson, who is the most explosive edge rusher that we have in this class. He's the most twitched up, explosive edge rusher. And so getting to go up against him every day is kind of like an iron sharpens iron thing when you look at how good Olu is at pass protection. Now, I'm wondering if this kind of caught your eye as well. He is not as imposing as I feel like he could be in the run game. He just doesn't bring that strength, that mean streak. And I feel like he can. There are times when I see that strength level from him as a pass protector, but then when it comes to being a people mover on the line of scrimmage for run blocking, it's not that same sort of mentality. And I think we see the run blocking grades have been low for Olu over the last couple of years, even with him grading out as an elite pass blocker at the same time. So that's really the only worry I have on my scouting report with him is I just wish he had a little bit more of that mean streak as a run blocker, because as a pass blocker, you could not ask for anything more with a player coming out of college to the NFL.
Yeah, I was just scanning down the list of offensive tackles drafted by year, and I think the first guy I come to that I would even consider being on the same level in terms of, so it's not just athleticism, but it's the fluidity of movement, it's the just being the technique, the technician.
It feels weird to say like, oh, Tristan Wirfs isn't as athletic as he is, because that's a weird statement to say, because he is, but fluidity is the better word. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but like that's the perfect word to describe it.
It's because Blake Freeland last year was like one of the best athletes we've ever seen at the offensive tackle position, but like on the field it's not quite the same thing. But the first guy that sort of has that entire package of technique, athleticism, fluidity of movement, all that put together that I would even consider being on the same kind of level is Tyron Smith back in 2011. So you're going back over a decade before you get to a guy that you would even think about being in that same category as him from a pass blocking standpoint. And if you go past Tyron Smith, maybe Trent Williams you would think about before. Honestly, I think he's better than Trent Williams was coming out.
Right, as a pass blocker, I would agree. Yeah.
So now you might be going back to Joe Thomas in 2007.
Right, Joe Thomas in 2007.
That's where he is. And I agree with you. I think the weakness that shows up on tape is, if it is a weakness, is just functional brute power, strength, force. And it shows up the most in the run game. You see it occasionally in pass protection as well, when a guy really goes at him with a power rush, with a bull rush. And I think the reason it will jump off the tape for him in this draft is just by direct comparison to the other guys, because actually that's the strength of a lot of the other guys in your list, is they've got that, that inertia ability. When they make contact, you're moving.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, that's something that Joe Alt does very well. Yeah. Joe Alt's measurables, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame, 6'8", 315 pounds. I mean, this dude's just a massive human being. And he's a former tight end. He played tight end in high school. He played offensive line as well. He moves over to offensive line for Notre Dame. He's starting very, very early at Notre Dame. I believe he started as a true freshman that entire season. I know he started for a little bit, but you see the PFF grades right there on the screen. I mean, it's some of the best, most well-rounded offensive line play that you're seeing in the country. And there are times, I think, last year where he still struggled with maintaining leverage and really being able to redirect that contact. And, where I think 6'8", we look at these offensive tackles and we say, wow, we love the size. We love the length of this guy, but it's a little bit of a give and take, because if you're taller, that sometimes means that, okay, maybe you're a little bit off balance. Maybe you don't have that much center of gravity. Maybe it's tougher for you to be flexible, to really sit down, to anchor. And I saw some of those concerns with Alt last year, but he is mitigating those even better this year. And so it just seems as, even if you have a little bit of concerns with some of the natural leverage and flexibility from Joe Alt, it has gotten better. That specifically has gotten better from his freshman year to his sophomore season to now as a draft eligible junior. And so when you see that sort of progression in the area that you might have the biggest concerns over, there might be a physical limit that you hit, but you feel very confident that you're going to get the best version of a really, really talented player. And when that's the case in a game of the NFL draft, that's a risk for guys that you select. You're going to take that every time. So I think both of these players are future top 10 overall picks.
Yeah, it's funny. First impressions are powerful, and his first game this year was against Navy, right? So I flip on the tape, and like the first few snaps I see of him, you have this like giant monster blocking these like poor Navy midshipmen. They're like my size on the edge. It looked like it looked a lot like
to the troops. Is what it was.
It looked a lot like I would imagine me and Steve running past blocking drills would look like. The same kind of dynamic in terms of size versus size. But then you turn on the tape against actually proper size pass rushers, and he still looks like a monster. He's huge and he's strong. He kind of his tape reminded me a little bit of, remember when Quentin Nelson was playing at Notre Dame, and he looked like an NFL offensive lineman playing on a college offensive line, right? Just from a size, physicality standpoint, that's what Joe Alt looks like right now. Like he looks like an NFL left tackle on Notre Dame's offensive line. He's just visibly and obviously bigger, stronger, better than everybody else around him.